everybody, and welcome back into the panel room. This evening, we're doing a panel called Romancing Hanukkah, and my guests are three authors who have written Hanukkah-themed romance novels. They are Stacey Agdern, Elliot Cooper, and Penelope Peters. I'm your moderator, Nancy Northcott. Stacey Agdern is an award-winning former bookseller who has reviewed romance novels in multiple formats and given talks about various aspects of the romance genre. She's a proud romance writer who incorporates Jewish characters and traditions into her stories so that people who grew up like she did can see themselves take center stage on the page. She lives in New York, not far from her favorite hockey team's practice facility. Elliot Cooper is all about happy endings and positive queer rep in genre fiction, specifically subgenres of romance and erotica. His stories range from sweet to scorching hot, light to dark, humorous to serious, and everything in between. He loves to experiment with genre mashups and old favorite tropes, turning some on their heads, meeting others head on. Penelope Peters grew up with a Hanukkah menorah on one side of the living room and a Christmas tree on the other. Now she makes a point of keeping the Christmas decorations put away until Hanukkah is over, unless the calendar dictates otherwise. She grew up with kugels and latkes and is always on the hunt for Hanukkah-themed socks. Penelope has been writing stories since she was 9. She wrote in fandom spaces for nearly a decade before returning to original works, and has published 12 books since her first in 2016. Penelope writes primarily male-male romance with a paranormal romance twist, though she's planning to expand from that within the next year. So welcome, y'all. It's great to have you. I'd like to start off by doing something for the people who may not necessarily be well-versed in the Hanukkah tradition. So let's talk first about what Hanukkah is. Stacey, do you want to take that first?
Okay. So basically, like, what it started as is a menorah. The Ner Tamid was lit for, the center aspect of Hanukkah is the miracle of the lights. And it tells the story of a band of Jews who, after fighting a war, they discover that the temple that they worshipped in has been desecrated, has been destroyed. And so what they do is they try to put it all back together, and then what ends up happening is that the most important aspect of the temple is the Ner Tamid, the eternal light. And as the story goes, it takes 8 nights to make new oil, but they only have enough oil to last for the 8 nights. So, and by some miracle, the oil that they have lasts for the 8 nights, just in time for the new oil to arrive and allow them to keep the eternal light going as a temple requires. It's one of my favorite holidays in the Jewish calendar because it has become in the United States a holiday of identity. It's a holiday where we are able to sit with our family, whether it's by blood or a chosen family, and celebrate our heritage, who we are. It's a very wonderful part of a time of year that I like to call the season of light and miracles. And one of the things you think about is like all of the holidays, a lot of the holidays that are surrounded around this time in the winter are all about a source of light and a miracle. And so that's what I see as Hanukkah.
Okay. Elliot, Penelope, would either of you like to add anything to that?
Just that when I was growing up, I was always taught that Hanukkah was not the most important of the holidays in the Jewish calendar. It's certainly not as important in the Jewish calendar as Christmas is in the Christian calendar. So for us, Hanukkah was always very small and continues to be small, but that's one of the reasons I like it.
Yeah.
Elliot, do you have anything to add?
I didn't grow up Jewish, so I guess at my house we kind of place a little more importance on it than it probably deserves in the scheme of the other holidays. But it's just because we haven't been doing it for very many years, and it's something that is kind of recognizable and culturally, even in kind of the broader American culture. But it's nice to we're still kind of building our own traditions and stuff like that as we go along, which is nice.
Well, that actually leads into something else I wanted to ask you, which is whether there are any misconceptions that you've noticed about the holiday among people who are not Jewish. Penelope, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the perception of it, that it's on equal par with Christmas in terms of its importance. The biggest misconception I always had with it is that it's present palooza and it's family homecoming, and that was never the case for us. That was the homecoming type holiday was Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and maybe Passover. Hanukkah was just there, and it was just the proximity to Christmas that always made it bigger in everybody else's mind. So I definitely had people who, make a point of when they're going around, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas. Oh, and Happy Hanukkah to you as well. It was like, okay, thank you.
Do you all have anything to add to that?
Well, like for me, because of its sort of cultural importance, I see it as a holiday. As I said, like I see it as a holiday of identity. It's sort of a situation where like 99 times out of 100, people don't necessarily understand, like 99 times out of 100, when non-Jews are talking about the Jewish religion in general, they think about Hanukkah. And so it gives us a sort of unique way of allowing people to to shift focus, to shift that lens of kind of identity and allow us to talk about who we are. Because it is not as much of a religiously significant holiday, the idea of the commercialization, the idea of commercialization as recognition, the idea of like making it a sort of a larger cultural holiday than it is a religious one is an easier kind of space to talk about. It's every family has their own traditions, and every family sort of does things differently. For more of but yeah, because it is a holiday of identity, it was kind of important for my family to and even more as I was working retail for like 10 years or so, I think part of the reason I became so interested in Hanukkah as a general rule is that for me it was a way of saying, hi, by the way, I'm Jewish, I celebrate Hanukkah. That was why when people were like, oh, and happy Hanukkah, I felt seen. I felt, understood for 5 minutes, I guess, if that makes sense at all.
I like that way of looking at it because it does tie into the whole, what you were saying about the holiday of identity. It's a way for us to reclaim the Jewish identity, to remind people, hi, we're here. We're not actually we're not hiding or anything. And because Hanukkah is very easy, it's accessible. So it makes it easy as a entryway holiday, if you can call it that, to start talking about those things and the things that make us different and the things that make us the same and all of that. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Elliot, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I run into a lot that I live in the South, and I'm part of a very small Jewish community that's kind of spread out geographically over an area. There's no temples or synagogues in my town, so I have to go 30 minutes away. And some of the congregation members travel even farther than that. So I tend to be the only Jew that most people in this area know. And so I get a lot of weird questions, which I'm happy to answer, but it's just kind of, I'll get questions like, so Hanukkah's a Jew close.
Elliot, I think you're freezing. Do you want to repeat that answer?
It's just that kind of perception that it's a direct answer that I still have to explain to people that Jews don't believe that Christ week. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. I'm kind of like, there's a very big cultural buffer where I live, where people are very steeped in their own religious tradition, and they are not very aware of those outside of themselves.
Well, so building off of that, let's talk about the ways that you do celebrate Hanukkah. Elliot, you were saying that you all are starting your own traditions. Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I have a visual aid. So we really got into like playing dreidel, and my husband he's very good at it. Like, he's stupid good at it. And he's not even Jewish, so it's like, go figure, right? But he'll like spin them and like make them spin on the tops and stuff, like the stems. He spins them on the stems. Like, and then so somehow he found
Awesome.
Major League Dreidel, which is not, I don't think they're still a thing anymore, but we got a spinagogue, which is a dreidel arena, and I'll open some. They used to sell them at Bed Bath and Beyond, but we had to wait, and they did a special order like thing. So inside you had like a stopwatch and some little plastic dreidels, and then there's like different little rings, so you can like make it bigger or smaller, like
Wow.
that. And then
So cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And they have little inserts that you can put on the playing field, so you can do like a skee-ball style or like a baseball thing. But then you also have these magnetic pockets that open, and this is where you store your gelt.
Oh my God.
And it turns into a
Oh, that is the best.
Isn't that great?
Oh,
Well, but if you would,
Yeah, it's really cool.
the best. I love it.
Gelt is, well, now it's chocolate coins that you play dreidel to win. That's your currency in the game. And my daughter always is like eating it like throughout, and I'm like, you can't play if you don't have any more coins to put in, right? Like,
well, so actually, how do you play? I mean, absent a really cool arena like that, how would you play dreidel? Anybody?
I would always try to go and play, and my kids we do it now too, and we would always lose focus halfway through the game because of that very reason. We were way more interested in eating chocolate than we were actually playing the game.
They had different little.
Oh God.
Yeah, I think Elliot's internet's freezing up on us.
Sorry, my thing broke up a little.
That's okay. I mean, it happens.
Okay, I think you're back for me.
Yeah, we can see you. You were about to say they have different something, and then
different inserts. So there's like skee ball, and you put this on the bottom of the thing. There's like a little baseball field. They have the moon, and their slogan is "No Gelt, No Glory." So then this one was Gelt, and then this one had a latkes.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah, it was really fun.
I love it.
They did a special order
now I'm hungry.
period.
That's another story entirely.
I think it was like it might have been 3 years ago. But before that, they had sold them in Bed Bath and Beyond for like 1 year, I think in like 2013 or something like that. And so I don't know if they're going to do any more runs, but the group that does it is Major League Dreidel. So if y'all keep an eye.
Yeah. Well, let's suppose for a minute that somebody doesn't have
on that. They might do another.
Let's suppose for a minute that somebody doesn't have a really cool arena like that. all they have is the dreidel, which is essentially a top, right? It's
Yeah.
So how is the game played? Can you play the game with just a top? And if so, how do you play and how do you win? Anybody?
You can play it whenever, wherever.
You have your top, and you have your pile of gelt or pennies or dimes or hard candies, whatever you want to play with.
Raisins or whatever, yeah.
And you spin it. 4 sides to the top. Each side has a different letter on it. Nun, Gimel, Shin, and I'm completely blanking on the last one.
It's either hay or it's
Hay.
yeah,
Well,
well, in
or
Israel it's yeah.
or a pay, depending on where the dreidel is
Yeah.
made.
And depending on which of those sides is facing up when it lands is what you're supposed to do.
Okay. And so how do you acquire gelt when you play this game?
If your dreidel lands on take the pot, you get to take what's in the middle.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what are some other ways to celebrate the holiday? Stacey, do you want to start us with that?
So one of the amazing like oh god, brain isn't working for the word, but we've already talked about latkes, and latkes are amazing. And one of the things that I love about Hanukkah and its food is that all it has to be is fried. That's it. And so like you have a serious bunch of fantastic foods from all over the world that are associated with the holiday. The most famous ones are latkes, which are, as the amazing background that Elliot showed 2 minutes ago, are amazing potato pancakes made various ways and fried in oil. And sufganiyot, which are Israeli donuts, also fried, that come in various fillings. You know, you might have a dreidel game to start, and then latkes in the middle, and then maybe later we sing songs. So it depends on what family traditions, you know, people have. But I love my latkes and applesauce. So.
We would always have them with sour cream or powdered sugar. But what the other big thing you do on Hanukkah is to light the lights. So the first night of Hanukkah, you light one light. Well, you're really lighting 2 lights because you're lighting the shamash, and then you're lighting 1 candle. And the second night you light 2. On the third night you light 3. On and on and on until you get to the 8th night when you have every single candle lit. And that's the best night because it's so nice and bright and cheerful, and you know it's when everyone turns out the lights and just goes, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I grew up in the South, and the saying here is, if you can eat it, we can fry it. So the idea that it's the holiday that involves fried food is just really appealing.
Yeah.
So what I think we've covered your favorite parts of the celebration kind of in the conversation. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
Hanukkah music. We're always really big on checking out whatever the latest is from a couple of a cappella groups that they always do like a new like pop culture like tune, but they'll like make it a Hanukkah song. 613 is one of them, and
Yes.
the Maccabeats is the other one. Yeah, they're a lot of fun. They're very funny guys. Very clever, like, and great singers. So
yes, oh my God. As a side note, their 613's Vihishe Amda got me through Passover. I loved their version of it. It was gorgeous. But I love, like, Hanukkah music is amazing. Sorry to like jump in again.
oh no, you're good. There's also a Hanukkah metal album that we found on YouTube, and it is really good. It's like the what's the Oh Hanukkah that they do is like really good. I liked every single song, but it's all heavy metal. Like it's great. Like power metal, like old 80s.
Anybody else have anything to add?
That's amazing. I could talk forever about Hanukkah music. Well, Joe Buchanan, who I adore, who's actually from Texas, has a song called Shine, which I love. It's really fun and really bright. And the Nefesh Mountain, I love their stuff. I like to, they're I don't know how I describe their music. They're Jewgrass, basically, like bluegrass with like this sort of Jewish influences. They're gorgeous. The band that was formed right before them was the Mamadoni Band by the lead singer of Nefesh Mountain, and she did some great stuff too. But Hanukkah music is so much fun, whether it's like a parody song or an original.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, I love Idina Menzel's version of, oh God, what's it called? It's the sort of the one, Seis Candeligas, I want to say. Ocho Candeligas, brain is not working. Like, that's like sort of one of the big Sephardic and Ladino Hanukkah songs. So like so many different albums have a version of that song, and it's just gorgeous to listen to.
So we've got food, we've got music, we got games. Anything else? No? Well, then let's talk about books. So what inspired each of you to write a romance novel with a Hanukkah theme? Penelope, do you want to start us?
Not really.
Okay. Stacey, Elliot? Well, why don't
I guess I can if nobody else wants to.
I think you're up.
As long as my internet holds out.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was representation, really, and not being able to find the kind of holiday romance that I wanted to read. I tried to read a couple of them, and they were just, I don't know. It either falls into a sort of like quasi-conversionist like thing, where like the one hero or heroine will like be persuaded to become like Christian or something, which is, I mean, sure, that's fine for some people, but that's not my fantasy. So, it's just kind of hard sometimes just to like have that like sense of normalcy that you feel and want to see it reflected in what you read. So I was like, yeah, I'll write the story I want to read.
Anybody else? I mean, we don't have to talk about it if you'd rather not. We can move on.
No, I think that's pretty much it. There's you write what you want to see in the world. You write what you want to read, and I wanted to read I wanted to read a Hanukkah story, and I wasn't finding a Hanukkah story that I wanted to read. I also had a really good idea for one. Is really what it comes down to it. So a lot of things I'd like to write about, and I can't come up with a good idea. And I had one for Pens, and so that's what I decided to go ahead and write it. And it's good to have that representation out there, to have another Hanukkah book. And I think people are hungry for Hanukkah books because it gets a lot of focus. Every year it's another set of people like, oh, there's another Hanukkah book. Yay, I'm going to read it. And the response I got from bloggers and everyone, oh, you've read a Hanukkah book. Yay, I can never find enough of these. So I don't want to say it's supply and demand, but there's a little bit of supply and demand going on there too.
Stacey, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So first of all, Penelope, I absolutely enjoyed your book. I absolutely enjoyed that story. I loved the bakery. I loved the hockey team. I loved everything about that story. And then I will also say that for me, I wrote Miracles. I wrote Miracles for the same reason. I had written 4 very angsty stories dealing with my feelings about a political event that had happened. And I needed a breather. I needed a fuzzy blanket. I needed something that I could wrap my head around and be happy about. And I spent about a month and a half watching holiday movies. And that sort of happiness sort of came into my brain, and like you said, Penelope, that was, you know, when you're talking about ideas, when you have the perfect one, you have to write it. And so that's how I ended up writing Miracles. That's how I ended up writing my Hanukkah story, because, and there were so many different threads that that people were talking about, that I saw that I had a good idea to write about. And as Elliot said too, like I wasn't seeing the representation that I wanted in the books that were there, so I wrote my own. And it's a wonderful thing to like have a kaleidoscope of a community writing these brilliant stories. Like it's a nice thing to see, like supply and demand, like giving a community that needs to see representation, giving them that representation, you know, joining the books that are there already, like learning, you know, the fact that you're part of a brilliant community of writers. And, you know, not only do you not feel so alone, but you know that your book is not alone, if that makes sense at all.
Well, that seems like a good way to segue into the book. Why don't you tell us about it? Will you give us a bit about what the story's about, and then we'll let everybody else do the same.
Right. So Miracles and Menorahs is set in a small town not very far from New York City. This particular town has had a Hanukkah festival for the past 9 years, but there's been an election, and a brand new trustee on the board has decided that they would like instead to maybe have a holiday festival the next year and add Santa and add some red and green. And so the heroine of our story, who is the vice chair of this year's festival, has decided she is not giving up this festival without a fight. There is no way that she is going to let this 9 years of life of happiness go without doing her best to save it. And what she decides to do, she notices that the marketing and advertising campaign is awful. It doesn't have a direction, it doesn't have anything. And in order to save this festival, she's going to get something that she can build the festival around, and that is a menorah. As you were talking about earlier, a large menorah to stick in the center of town and to use as a logo for all the marketing materials to get people to realize that there has been this Hanukkah festival in Hollowville, which is the small town. The problem is, of course, that menorahs are, especially large ones, are expensive. And so the budget, the hearts of the Hollowville Festival community are large, the budget is not, which means we need a sculptor to do this out of the goodness of their heart. And so enter our hero, our main male character, Isaac, who is a sculptor. His grandmother is a member of the Hollowville Jewish community, and she thinks this is a wonderful thing that he can do for her Jewish community and the town in general to make this menorah, except he doesn't necessarily like the idea of commercialization of the holiday, of the idea of large public gatherings and large menorahs, and he just would prefer to spend Hanukkah with his friends and with his grandmother. And so it's a story about how we celebrate Hanukkah, whether, you know, what is a community? What, you know, how big is a community? How big should it be? Where is, and of course it's a romance. So you have a sort of consistent conversation between those two sides of things. And it's a great sort of, it's a happy, fun sort of a story. And I really enjoyed writing it. Trying to think. And yeah, so this was the story that was inspired by way too many movies that I watched over a period of about a year. So,
Penelope?
So Ben's Bakery and the Hanukkah Miracle is about, so it starts off with Ben, who owns a kosher style bakery in Boston, and he's decided, and he's kind of a new at business, running a business. He's not new to baking, and he's decided to do a kosher style bakery and focus on Hanukkah. And the problem is that he grew up more of a secular Jew than a religious Jew, so he never kept kosher before. He knows the general rules, he doesn't know exactly how to go. he needs a little bit of help. And so this is where we enter with Adam. Adam, who is in Boston just for a week, and ends up being the week of Hanukkah because of a scheduling conflict, and he didn't really anticipate being away from home during Hanukkah. He walks into the bakery looking for just a little bit of Hanukkah cheer because the bakery is all done up in Hanukkah gear from top to toe, and there's no sign of Christmas whatsoever. And he starts helping out Ben, and that's how their relationship works and everything. And it turns into and eventually they fall in love, and that's the end of that. I'm terrible about that part. Please edit me out saying that.
Elliot, what's your book?
I have Hearts of Light, and it's novella, and it's kind of funny. It also involves a sculptor in a way, and a railing against commercialism, but the main character,
Awesome.
Dave, he's kind of fed up with the commercialism of the holiday and his family like getting all into that and stuff, and he wants to kind of go back to how things were when he was a kid, when it was more low key and it wasn't so like, competitive with Christmas and that kind of stuff, and it was simpler time. But add into that, he's got a crush on his best friend's uncle, who seems to be having some weird health issues, and it turns out that Amit, his friend's uncle, he's actually a golem, and there's some sort of like magical stuff going on with him, and as they kind of figure out that they do have feelings for each other and kind of work through that, he also helps Dave to kind of work through his wrestling with the commercialism of the holiday and figuring out how that he can just kind of, do the holiday the way he wants and let other people do it the way that they want, and they can all enjoy it together. So, but yeah, there's a lot having to do with like hand making things and building like familial bonds and like romantic bonds and all kinds of stuff. It's nice. It's warm and cozy. There's some nerdy stuff in there, like people playing D&D. So, yeah.
Well, what's a golem?
The traditional myth about the golem is that they were constructs, typically made out of clay and imbued with a sort of spiritual magic to sort of awaken them so that they would be protectors for shtetls, for Jewish communities. Sort of a nice bedtime story, I suppose, for kids, so that they'd feel like, hey, we're protected in here and stuff, and from anyone from the outside who might want to hurt us. Very interesting lore that I was happy to weave into this and had a lot of fun with.
Well, I'd be interested to know what you all found were the particular challenges, if any, to writing a holiday-themed romance. Anybody want to start?
I can if nobody else has anything.
Okay.
I think for me it was mostly that being someone who has converted to Judaism, that I just I didn't feel like I kind of had to push through the feeling that I didn't have the right to write my own holiday story for myself. And because of that, I made Dave's father a convert, so that that narrative was in there as well. So there was a blended family, and it was blended in a way that I actually don't typically see, because it's normally the other way around in romance books that I've come across for holiday stuff or just in general. And not that I'm super widely read, but it was just it was kind of getting over that feeling that I didn't have ownership over my own experiences, I guess, and like but I pushed through it, and I had support, and several of the much older ladies in my congregation were super supportive, and we're like, when's your book coming out? When can I buy your book? And so it was great.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Part of the problem I had, I wouldn't say it was a problem exactly, but so my character Ben he had more of a secular upbringing in terms of Judaism than the other character Adam, and in a way that kind of mirrored my own, because I grew up with one Jewish parent and one Catholic parent, and so we had both holidays. And I grew up like Elliot was saying, he lives there's no temple, there's no synagogue in his town. I was in a similar rural area. There was no synagogue. There was a congregation, but it was very small. And so I didn't have the community. And so I didn't have to reinforce certain things. So a lot of times I don't know the Hebrew. I don't know a lot of the cultural references. I don't know various aspects of Judaism, especially the type of Judaism that you'll see on television or in books, which tend to be very centered on New York. If you're Jewish, you're from New York. And so that's how I basically wrote Ben, to not have that background, to cover the fact that I don't know it either. I actually got a sensitivity reader to help me out with Adam, because Adam does come from a very religiously steeped background, and I very much wanted him to have that background, but I don't know that background. So I got a sensitivity reader for my Jewish character for my own Voices book, because I especially want to talk about that there's a whole range of experiences of Judaism, and they're not all this one thing that you will find. You will find people who don't have that background and don't have and did not go to Hanukkah parties when they were growing up, and don't speak with peppering their language with Hebrew or Yiddish, and may have never eaten a bialy in their entire life. I haven't. But they're still Jewish. They still count as Jewish. That's actually one of the whole themes of Ben's, that he still counts. So, and that was one of the challenges I had in writing, was to make sure that it did count as a Jewish book. That's what I wanted it to be. Anyway.
I got a sensitivity reader as well, just to kind of back me up and the elements that I was less own voices about. So, yeah.
Stacey, did you want to add anything?
So, there are two different questions, and so one of the things that I sort of thought about when I was writing Miracles was the idea that, like, in every single small town romance that I have ever read, the relationship between the small town and the city is a huge gulf that is never divided. There is never an in-between. And one of the things that I tried to do in Miracles was to make sure that, because I didn't grow up that way. I grew up with the city, 45 minutes from where I grew up. And so, like, the idea of being able to be both interested in a large city and living in a small town at the same time was possible. So one of my characters lives in Brooklyn. The Brooklyn that I know, the vibrant, bright, brilliant Brooklyn that I've gotten to know, because my brother lives in Brooklyn, and the small town in Westchester County that I grew up in. And I wanted to show that in a small town style story, I could write those things and have them not have to decide between the small Westchester town and the big city of New York, that you can have both aspects of things. The other problem that I had was much more specific to the book, in which, so I've never been to a Hanukkah festival, but I think mostly it's because Hanukkah festivals don't exist the way I wrote. And so I had to literally like create one from the ground up. Like what kind of congregation would have one? What what would be the reason for it? What would it look like? Who would be doing what? What would the food court look like? What would all of these things look like? And so, because I had to, to plausibly create all of the little details that would hold a festival, would inspire a small town to create a Hanukkah festival. And there's a lot of information that I researched and learned because of all of that. And so there were things that I had to actually remove from the book because no, not everybody wants to hear about, the synagogue board meetings that would happen when someone decided to change the food court, or who, all of these little sort of, community details that I had to figure out in order to create this festival out of nowhere. So, and you were saying, Elliot, that like the older ladies at your synagogue were all excited about the book. The rabbi at the local congregation read my book. And one of the things that I did was I actually put in the name of a former congregant who'd passed at the age of 100. And as kind of like a little bit of afikomen for myself and for anybody who would know. And he said, when he was telling my father that he'd read the book, he said, your daughter put in, this gentleman's name. And I was like, you read that far? Wow. The rabbi of the congregation read this book and read this far to realize what I had done. So it was kind of interesting.
That's great.
You used the phrase afikomen. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes.
I'm familiar with that. What does that mean?
So generally speaking, the term, afikomen, generally speaking, is a Passover custom. One of the things that happens during the sort of central Passover Seder is that children or anybody of a particular age goes off to find the split piece of matzah that we call the afikomen. For children, it is the reason, and because the Seder cannot end until everybody has a bit of the afikomen, so children often, it's hidden and then found. It's either negotiated for auction, you name it. As long as the afikomen is returned, it is permitted as to how it happens. So when people talk about Easter eggs, I insert the phrase afikomen. It is a little sort of bit of hidden, right? Like it's as a little bit of like hidden sort of like reference to something. And it's a great reference. Like it's fun to use that term because it works, right? Like
yeah, I knew exactly what you meant as soon as you said it. So
it's a little surprise that you're going to find, unexpected surprise that you're going to find somewhere in the story.
Exactly.
I love the idea of a Hanukkah festival because the concept of having a festival that's just Hanukkah is such a magical thing. And the second I read about it, I was like, oh, this is such a cool idea. Yep. Please tell me it exists somewhere in the world, somewhere where you can go. No, it needs to exist. Where it's all Hanukkah and all the time, and Hanukkah music, Hanukkah food, and lights all over, and like little shops. I had a Hanukkah Christmas market in my head.
That's
Hanukkah market, like to have.
Yep. That is literally. Yep. That literally happens in the book.
And it was magical, and I think that's the thing I think that's what made your story so much of a Hanukkah story for me, because you've got all of these you get Christmas novels out the ones you would play every Christmas, and there's a lot of magical elements within them. There's something in some little spark that turns them into this wonderful Christmas story, and the idea of a Hanukkah market just turned that story. It was the Hanukkah version of every single one of those Christmas books, and it was fabulous.
Cute. Yeah, I was like, I couldn't help, like, I felt that it was like so important to have all of those aspects represented, and it was because because when I sat down, I was like, what would this magical, beautiful festival look like? And how would it play out? What elements would be necessary? And I was like, of course we're going to have the market. Of course we're going to have the hot chocolate and the sufganiyot lattes. And of course we're going to have, like, you know, the dreidel races on, you know, on the lakes, you know, watched by the hockey team. Like all of those things that I had, exactly. Yeah. Like I thought about every single Christmas festival and every single movie that I have ever seen or book that I have ever read. And I took it and I was like, but yeah, like, I wonder, like, I think about like the sufganiyot in Ben's Bakery all the time, and like how beautiful that tradition becomes with like the kids, you know, coming in and going, oh, can we, you know, I love that. And I love the way traditions work that way. You know, it like, you know, you taste that donut, and it, you know, for some person it's just like this yummy donut, but for someone else it's this gorgeous tradition, and it's a recognition and understanding, and it's amazing. So.
Well, that actually leads into a related topic, which is, what was the most fun thing for you about writing your holiday-themed romance?
The sufganiyot, making them. I'd never made them before. And so I tried to make them with my boys. So I went looking for recipes. I love to bake anyway, so this was just another fun challenge. And found a couple of recipes. And I found a recipe that was specifically for kids, where you put all of the ingredients into a Ziploc bag and you let the kids squash up the bag to mix all of the ingredients. So we did that, and it was an absolute mess, and I don't recommend it. But they had so much fun doing it. And then we made them, and we fried them, and we filled them up with the fillings, and then we had so many donuts that we ended up going around the neighborhood and handing out donuts, because there was no way I was going to have that many donuts in our house. Just 4 of us, we all would have been loaded like crazy. So we walked around, and we were the sufganiyot fairies, basically saying, here, have some donuts. Have some donuts. It was fun.
Awesome. I love it. Oh my God.
Elliot, did you want to add anything?
Oh, the most fun part, I really like writing a D&D session into it, and I've had a lot of fun comments from people who've read it about, they were like, there was like a D&D session in there, like I wasn't expecting it, like, but they were like, this is so great, like such a nerdy little like gem. But I think that, and then the moment when Dave figures out how to heal Amit is just, it's a really touching, like heartwarming, like romantic moment, and that was really fun to craft. I really liked that.
Well, you know, it seems like in order to be a holiday romance, it has to not only have the happy ending of a romance, but it also has to have really serious feel-good ending, apart from the couple finding their way to each other, or the people in the book finding their way to each other. There has to be this kind of seasonal goodwill and uplift. Do you all think that's a fair description?
I agree. Yeah.
The magic. It needs holiday magic.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you think a holiday romance should have?
I think the family element is really important to whatever that means for the characters, whether it be you know, their blood family, or their found family, or the family that they've created for themselves. Like I feel like that's really important, because I feel like the holidays, like that's got a very family oriented feel to it in general for most winter holidays.
Anything else? Well, then let's switch gears for a minute and let's just talk about writing in general. What led each of you to decide to try your hand at fiction? Elliot, do you want to start us off?
I've been writing since I was a little kid. I love writing. Although I've been kind of in a slump for about a year, but that's just burnout rearing its ugly head every so often. but I love telling stories, and I like I don't know. There's just and that's one thing I love about Judaism is it's all about a book. Like it's like we're the people of the book. Like there's books are so important. Storytelling is so important for humanity, for humans. That really I've always been drawn to it.
Penelope, Stacey, you want to add anything?
I've always written fiction. I've been writing fiction almost my entire life. So it wasn't, I don't know what exactly drew me. I like writing. I found that if there are days where I don't write, or if I don't write for a certain stretch of days, my mood just plummets and I get testy, and my temper gets so much shorter. And the days that I do write, the kids could be doing World War III around me, and I'm just, yeah, it's all good. Here we go. We'll just put you all to bed a little earlier. So yeah, writing is just such an essential part of my day that it's hard to not have some sort of hand in it. Even if it's only 10 minutes, even if it's not actually writing, it's just somehow in the process of creating.
Stacey, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, the same. Like I've always written. There was a period where I was writing a lot of essays and reviews and things, and I loved that part. I've always written fiction. I know there is an extended period that is actually still kind of going on where I wrote a lot of novellas, and I like that. I'm kind of like, I like both novellas and novels. Miracles was actually the first single title length book that I'd written in a very long time. There was a period where I think I wrote about 7 novellas. And then after six and a half novellas, and then about 15 to 20K each. And then after number 6, I said, okay, let's stop this for a while and maybe try something longer again. because one of the things is I love anthologies. I love collaboration. I'm a sucker for it. So like, if some amazing people are like, hey, do you want to write a novella for this thing? My answer will always be yes. I actually wrote a novella that came out in September for an anthology, a Sukkot story.
Oh, nice.
Which was so much fun. It was my like Sukkot country music story, which was amazing and so much fun. The anthology itself is fantastic and has like a whole bunch of different holidays. There's a Yule story, there's a Juneteenth story, there's a Purim story, there's a story for the high holidays. There is this amazing, oh God, like there's some really, really great stories in there. And like, it was interesting to think about like writing a holiday novella for a holiday that people don't necessarily know about outside of the Jewish community versus writing a Hanukkah novel, and like what went into those. And it was interesting because one of the things, I don't necessarily know if you guys thought about this when you were writing your stories, but like for me, the only thing I explained in Miracles about Hanukkah was the fact that the food has to be fried. That was it. I didn't go into any other explanation about the holiday. Whereas with this 15 to 20K Sukkot story, I was like, how much explanation can I fit in to make people understand what this holiday is actually about?
Well, actually, what is it about? Because I'm not familiar with it.
So Sukkot is a harvest holiday. It is centrally celebrated by the brain is not working today, by a 3-sided open roof dwelling called a sukkah. It is open roofed so that you can see the stars, and it is decorated with garlands of fall harvest fruits. and vegetables. Synagogues, when they celebrate this holiday, often have a cornucopia on the beam on the altar. And you're supposed to shake the lulav and the etrog. The etrog is a lemon sort of citrusy thing, and a lulav, which is it's a frond branch made up of different sort of trees, of sort of like, which is the best I can explain this holiday. The central focus of the story was a night in a sukkah, which is actually considered a mitzvah. It's a sort of one of the many good deeds that we do throughout the year, and it's a having a meal in the sukkah is considered a mitzvah. So that's kind of what the story ended up being about. So.
Well, what's the title of the anthology?
So the anthology is called Love All Year, and my story is called 3 Stars in the Sky.
Thank you. I like to try to talk to writers about advice for new writers, for people who are just starting out, for people who might find that blank page really intimidating. Do you have any suggestions for those people? Penelope, you want to start?
I actually wrote things down. My advice is finish your first draft, and I'm not the first person to say it. There's a lot of writers out there who will say, finish your first draft, and you have to, because there's always a point when you're writing where you want to stop writing and you don't want to continue writing your story. You've got to finish it. Go in with the idea that everyone's a terrible writer at first. No one writes their first story beautifully, and all first drafts suck. They just do. Can I say that? Is that okay? Okay, good. Yeah, all first draft sucks. They're just terrible. You got to finish it so that you can go back and edit it and make it better. And yeah, always finish your first draft. Read it through before you share it. Share it. Always share it before you share it with the wider audience. Share it with a smaller audience. And listen to the criticism, because even the criticism that's wrong has some kernel of truth to it. Some of the most interesting criticism I've gotten was the stuff I didn't want to hear, but there was always something true to make the next story better, or to even make that story better.
Elliot, you want to add anything?
As someone who frequently struggles with writer's block, I think sometimes to get over that blank page like syndrome, something I've done in the past is to just kind of, what is that called? Where you just write words, like, not freedom of thought, but
Free writing?
What is it?
Free writing?
Free writing, yeah, like where you just kind of, you just write words, like whatever's in your brain, like think like, I don't want to stare at this page, like just write that, and like write the next series of, thoughts that come to you until you kind of work through that, and then you can kind of think basically aloud kind of on the page of getting yourself into that mode of being ready to start putting the story on the page. Or another thing I've done is to interview my main character on the page, like ask them like, why don't you want to talk to me right now? Like, like stuff like that, or just ask them questions about themselves to get to know them. And that can and you can just move that to another document later. And then you have some stuff that may help you with character development that you didn't know about if you're not a big planner. I'm a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants. So I do very little pre-planning, usually write down like vague character sketches just so I don't forget details. And maybe like the starting hook, and then like a turning point. And then here's 2 or 3 ideas of how this might end. And then, because if I tell myself too much of the story, my brain's like, yeah, you already know that story. Like, there's no point in telling it to anybody else. You don't, no point in telling it again. You already know it. So that could be another thing too. You might be over outlining if your brain works like that. So I don't know.
Stacey, did you want to add anything?
So generally speaking, my advice is to figure out don't be afraid to figure out what works for you. writing is one of those ridiculous processes where like everybody has a process and an idea that works for them. I cannot write without a playlist. I have to listen to that playlist as I draft. I am a ridiculous, but that's what works for me. A blank page doesn't scare me, and in fact, when I'm stressed in the middle of a draft that I have 70 million pages of, the best thing for me to do when I'm in the middle of that and I can't figure out what comes next is to open a blank page. Like, I've done what Elliot has suggested, and it works. Some people are terrified about the idea of a blank page in the middle of a draft. But that all comes with going through, as Penelope said, and finishing your draft. The most important thing is to get that story down. And as you're doing that, learn how you write best. Do you need music? Do you not? Do you outline? Do you not? How much of your story do you need to know before you start? Do you need to know specific, beginning, middle, and ending points, or do you need to know everything in a 7-page typed outline, single spaced? Don't be afraid to find out what works for you.
Be aware, it changes too. When I started off, I was so much a pantser when I started writing. I never outlined. I would write the story. I'd be halfway through the story and have no clue how it was going to end or how I was going to get there. And now I'm much more of a planner than I ever thought I would be comfortable being. And one of the first things I'll do is write a really quick, I call them synopsises. They're not really synopsises in the classic sense, but I write the story. I say, okay, well, here's my first character, and this is what he's going to do. And oh, here's another character's coming, and this is how they're interacting, and then this is going to happen, and and this will go on for 5, 6, 12 pages, right up until I get to the end. And then I go back and write my first draft from that, just basically, okay, oh, that's what happens next, and here's what comes next, and here's what comes next, and fill in all of the thousands of blanks that I left in this document that tells me what I'm going to be writing. And you do get stuck, and getting stuck is fine. It just means you're trying to figure out the next thing. And sometimes what I'll do is, and this will happen, and you'll see this in my drafts all the time, is the conversation's going great, and then it just comes to a dead halt because nobody's talking to each other. And I'll have character A say, well, right now we're supposed to be doing this, so eventually we're gonna figure out how we're supposed to do this. And character B will respond back, no, right, okay, and then I'm going to say something along the lines of this, and I'm going to bring up this other problem, and oh, I've got this idea. Why don't we go and have this background story going off over here, and character A will be, oh, that's a wonderful idea. And then I somehow manage to find my way back and start writing the story again, and hopefully find that section in that bit so I can change it.
I'm like, I don't necessarily know if either of you do this, but if I write a synopsis, because I have to now, but like I actually have to pretend it doesn't exist. I literally have to engage in a fiction where my brain cannot be reminded that there is a synopsis. Otherwise, the book isn't getting written.
So you write the synopsis and then you close the file and don't look at it while you're writing?
I can't.
Because I have I'm writing. I create a new document, but I'm literally writing with the synopsis right underneath where I'm going.
I can't. I literally can't.
It's
because
like
my brain
incepted yourself.
Exactly.
It's Inception.
Yeah, exactly. It's like otherwise, like, because I am one of those people who, once I write the synopsis, I've told the story. Why do I need to do this? So I literally have to pretend I haven't. Now I don't have to go so far as to write not in order. Like I don't have to write out of order. I can write in order if I choose to, but I literally have to pretend that I'm writing the story in the same way without that synopsis. I cannot even think about it because it gets me blocked. It gets me stuck. I.e., I have done this before, and you don't have to do this again.
Okay.
Well, why don't we wind up by talking a little bit about the other books that you all have written? Because, I mean, we've had I've had a great time talking about Hanukkah. I hope you have too. But
Yeah.
I know that's not all you all write. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your other books? And Stacey, let's start with you.
So I have a wonderful series of anthologies that I was in about a hockey team called the New York Empires. And there are three books in that series so far. Going All In, Roughing It, which just came out, and I Sing the Puck, which is the second story in the series. I wrote about, in that series, the first book is a lovely little Neapolitan with stories by Isabel Kelly and Cassandra Carr as well. And then when Kenzie McClure joined us for I Sing the Puck, it became a slightly hockey paranormal series. So it was great fun. And Roughing It is also with Kenzie McClure and Isabel Kelly. And then, as I said, I was in the Love All Year anthology that came out in September with so many amazing authors. Felicia Grossman, edited by Elizabeth Kahn. Katerina Zia was in the anthology. Celestine Martin's debut, Yule Story, and just a whole wonderful list of brilliant writers, Hallie Alexander. And then I was in this amazing project called the Rogue Anthologies, which are unfortunately not available, but I'm figuring out what to do with my stories. And then Some Miracles came out on October 13th, and the sequel, which I am in the middle of revising as we speak, comes out in June of 2021 from Thule Publishing.
Elliot, what about you?
I've mostly written either, I guess it's mostly paranormal or sci-fi romance. I write queer romance. My novels, my favorite one's called My Boyfriend's Back, and it's a romance between a necromancer and a zombie. In which necromancer is kind of a Harry Potter-esque kind of thing where, but like a little more grown up, a little more college range, I guess, where there's like a magical college, but it's kind of like embedded in mundane society. And the main character needs to, in the first chapter, at the end of the first chapter, his boyfriend dies. And so he has to use he chooses to use an experimental potion to try and bring him back, and he comes back wrong. So then he has to kind of figure out what's going on with that. That is, it's the angsty romantic nightmare of weirdness that like I wish that had been around when I was like a teenager. I would have loved to have read it as a teenager. But I also have some sci-fi romances that take place in space, more space opera kind of things. Rogue Wolf is the main one of those. I've got smattering of short stories. I have been in a couple anthologies. One of them's out of print. It was, and then I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while. I think Hearts of Light originally came out in an anthology, but then I've since re-released it independently as a novella. But I have a short story in anthology called Welcome to Miskatonic University, which is a Cthulhian, I don't know if y'all are familiar with H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, but I have a lot of fun. He was a horrible person. He created some really cool stuff, but terrible person. So I have a lot of fun hoping that he's like rolling over in the afterlife, if that exists. So because I've made really queer characters in his mythos. But that was really cool. The story in there is called The Needle's Eye of Nothingness, and it's the first time that I had a trans main character. I'm trans, and I've just kind of come into writing trans characters kind of late because it's easier to write transition narratives where it's not quite so close to home. Things like zombies and werewolves and stuff like that. But it was nice to actually have a trans main character, especially in a wacky, weird paranormal, supernatural kind of setting. I guess that's kind of the highlight reel. Oh, and I have a pirate romance too, Prince and Pirate. That one's a lot of fun too. More of a quasi historical fantasy, but like set on another planet, so I can make up my own countries.
Penelope?
So I write mostly male romance, and the vast majority of it is a type of paranormal called the Omegaverse, which is weird and wonderful and kinky and strange, and I absolutely adore it. And Ben's Bakery is not a Omegaverse. It's actually the first book I wrote that wasn't a Omegaverse, because the story just didn't. I started writing it and it wasn't, and that was fine by me. And I'm finding the more stories I write. I've actually got 2 in various draft versions that are also not a Omegaverse. So I'm going to be putting those out as well, just to get kind of move away. But I'll still go back to it because it's my first love. And a lot, I like writing stories that just look at things a little differently, and always end up having something. They always end up having some sort of thing to say about the world. It's interesting how you can take a paranormal story and really comment on what's going on in the real world. And that's one of the things I really like doing with it, is making them accessible and making them real and making people go, oh, this could actually happen like this, sort of, I guess.
Well, then let's close by telling people where they can find you and find more information about your books. Elliot, do you want to start?
Yeah. Wow. Do I? This is amazing. I feel like I'm blanking on my own website. But it should be elliotcooperwrites.com, and I have an account on Twitter that's Elliot Writes, but I haven't been on there in quite a while. And I'm also on Facebook as Elliot Cooper. And I think that's pretty much everywhere.
Okay, Penelope?
You can find me on my website, penelope-peters.com. I'm on Twitter, and sometimes I'll have a whole bunch of Twitters and tweets in one day and then be silent for like 5 or 6 days in a row. So it's very erratic. Penelope_writes on Twitter. I've got a Facebook, which is a Facebook page, which is Penelope Peters Author. There's a lot of Penelope Peters on Facebook. And and then Amazon and BookBub and all of those, and I can never remember those websites. But if you go to the website, it's got everything linked.
Stacey?
Excuse me. So my website is staceyagdern.com. Twitter, I'm pretty often around Twitter at NYStacey. Facebook is Stacey A. Agdern, which is my author page. I'm on Instagram as S. Agdern and BookBub as well. So, but if you go to my website, you can find all the links to everything there. So.
Well, that's great. And thank you all very much for joining me this evening. And thank you to everyone who is watching this panel. We all appreciate it. And check out these people's books. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thanks.
having me.
Oh, it's been a blast.
This was a lot of fun.